like we have 2 minutes after the hour. Let's give it one more minute to see if we get any more people. I know some people are going to be joining late, and some people have to leave. I did allocate an hour and a half, but some people will probably have to leave about 60 minutes in.
That's right.
Carol Paquette, you're in charge of mentoring. Carol,
Yes.
you're in charge of the mentoring program.
Yes, she is. Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, I forgot I was muted. Yes.
I tried to make contact and set that up, and something happened. I don't think I ever got the mentoring sheet. So I need to come back to that.
Okay.
We need a mentor at Raleigh Village East. And I have not gotten the first step of that right.
Okay. Well, if you would put your email in the chat, I will send you the information.
Thank you. We just lost. Where's
Alexa, stop.
She's a bad girl.
So Joel, do you want to do the presentation and have everybody on mute and then ask questions, or?
No, I actually, I don't think, no, we can stay off mute, I think. Let's see how it goes.
Okay. If anybody has a trash truck like I have right now in front of my house, can you mute during that time period?
Are you all seeing the Google Doc with the agenda? Is it?
Yes.
showing?
Yes.
Okay, great. I think we should dive in then. Great, looks like we have a wonderful group of people here today. I'm so glad that everybody could make it. And again, for those people who just joined, we are recording this. So you'll be able to view it again and also share it with some people as well who weren't able to make it today. Thought we would start and just set a little context for why we're here. And I just wanted to make a note that and just sort of share where I'm coming from on this. This happens to be a special day in my family because I have a father who's turning 80 years old today. And I share that for a couple of reasons. It's a celebratory day, but it also marks something specific for me that affects what we're doing here. About 10 years ago, just before my dad was turning 70, I got interested based on what he was doing in how do we support people as they're reaching that next phase of their lives. My dad was a practicing attorney, and he was trying to determine what he was going to do next. And I share that in the sense that in that 10-year period, my dad is still a practicing attorney. He's still living in the same home. And for all intents and purposes, in that 10-year period, very little has changed for him and for my mom in terms of what they do, how they do it. And I find that very instructive because I think if we look out at what has played out for the villages and for a number of things related to older adults and supporting them in their homes and communities, with all of the change that has happened in our society over the last 10 years, not a lot of substantial change has occurred in that 10-year period. And I'm both excited and frustrated by that. And that's part of why we're all here today. So so what I wanted to do, yes.
Excuse me, it's Paul.
Hey, Paul.
Is there a Zoom video? I only have the link for the phone.
Yes, there should have been a link in there. Can someone post it in the, I guess, or could someone, Barbara, would you be able to send that to Paul?
Yeah. Paul, what's your email?
paul.sobel@villageintheheights.org.
Okay, I'll send it to
Thank
you
you.
momentarily.
Thank you.
So the goal today is to build on conversations that were started at the closing session of the village gathering 3 weeks ago. But what I wanted to do today is, rather than have more of a presentation, I really wanted this more to be an interactive conversation. And Hillary and I just put together an agenda that we thought could get more people talking together. And the whole idea out of this session today is really to decide, how can we collectively move forward together with a shared pursuit of reimagining what the villages are and could be in our communities. And so I've had, since the session a couple of weeks ago, was there a question? Since the session a couple of weeks ago, I've had individual conversations with many of you with the idea of, how can we best support your efforts at a local level while also working together towards a more collective effort. And that's really to our agenda today. That's why we're all here. We're all doing great work in our local communities to try to sustain, maintain, and grow our individual villages. And at the same time, I believe, and many of you share that belief based on the conversations I've had, that a collective effort to help grow the national organization will also then support our individual efforts. So that's really what we're here to do today. And the 5 questions that we listed here: what are we doing here? Why are we doing this now? What can we do to help your individual effort at your local community? And then what are you asking me? What are you, Joel, asking me to do going forward? We're going to start to answer that question over the next 80 or so minutes. Before we go any further, does anybody have any specific questions they want to raise, or anything that anybody wants to just bring to the table? Now that I think we've got close to 30 people here, I think. Anybody want to come off of mute? Okay.
Hey, Joel, this is Jen. Sorry, I was struggling with
Hi, Jen.
And you'll probably address this later, but I think after our conversation, what I kind of envisioned was, that maybe the network could have, like, we were all struggling with the COVID policy. What should we do with COVID? If there could, I think that's where most of my time has been spent, is just, defining the perfect application, defining the perfect intake process, and I know that all the villages are different, but, and the resources are tremendous, but when you've just never done it before, you don't know what is the best practice going to be for you. So if there was maybe some sort of streamlined, does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I think it's important to note, Jen, that the people that reached out after the gathering represent a cross section of villages. More of them fit into that sort of phase of, they've been around between roughly 5 to 15 years or so, and they've reached a certain point. So the majority of the people on this call today represent villages that have been established, if you will.
Okay.
However, this is a multi-pronged component. We need to support those villages that are in either a more early stage, and maybe they have some traction, they've been working for a couple of years. And then we have also representatives of communities that are in the planning stages. And to your question, Jen, we have there are things that are common across those. And so how we share best practices going forward, how we mentor one another, how we share technology and share data is absolutely at the forefront of what we're talking about here. So it's definitely relevant. And how we best do that is something that my hope is for us coming together today is to start to create a group that is committed to doing that for all the villages.
That's what I thought.
some
Okay,
way.
thanks, Joel.
Joel,
Yeah.
this is
Morgan?
Morgan.
Uh-huh.
this is Morgan Gopnik from Northwest Neighbors Village in
Yes.
Washington, DC. I would just say from my perspective, those kinds of things, oh, let's share resources, share ideas and everything else. That's what V2V is all about. And its whole raison d'etre is to do those kinds of things.
Yeah.
My interest in this is to go to a qualitatively different leap, really thinking about the future. How could we change our funding models, change our communications, whatever. I mean, the normal work of V2V, of helping villages, I mean, that's something we always talk about.
You're absolutely right. And we've been doing that. And we need to do it better, but I think you're right. How do we make more of a transformative change around how we all do things? And yes, absolutely. Jackie, it looks like you have a question.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, Joel, we didn't actually get to chat. Telephone tag has been taken to a whole new level. During the conference, I chatted or messaged the panelists because I heard us start to talk about vendors and new partners and things like that, which was not where my head went when you were talking about taking the village to a whole new level. Where my head went was taking the Senior Care Corp as an example. Why in God's name does the federal government need to dole out $3.4 million to start a Senior Care Corp when we're already doing this?
Yeah.
So my expectation or hope is that when someone says caring for seniors, aging in place, is that the first place they look is to an intact, growing, successful organization or group of organizations that is the village. So that's what I expect, I hope, is our focus. Nobody should have needed to do that, right? That wasn't necessary if people knew us the way that they should know us. That's my hope in this conversation.
Can I build on Morgan's comments? I would say Reston for a Lifetime never was a traditional village. We are an informational resource across Reston, which is a very large community. But the comment, or at least the point that Joel, when he and I chatted, was sort of reimagining, how can I take what we've done and grow this into something else, or just to make it better. And so that's why I have stayed involved with V2V, even though we don't do service. We don't raise money. Basically, it's all volunteer. It's basically one person doing that, but though we have a lot of community partners. So I'm just very interested in this, reimagining villages initiative and really figuring out some really new directions.
And Joel, we've jumped into all these questions.
That's okay.
And we haven't yet articulated. I don't even know what we're talking about. So would you summarize for us this new vision and get away from generalities and tell us what new vision we're talking about? And then I think we can go in some common way forward.
Absolutely, Sarah. So I think.
Joel, excuse me, Joel,
Yep.
sorry.
Go ahead, Carol.
Sorry to interrupt. I've been trying to raise my hand. Before you start on that, in response to a couple of the comments that have been made, the network also has some other initiatives besides this one that Joel is talking about today, one of which is the mentor program. So Jen, some of your points about, we need best practices and we need sample documents and so on. That's something we're going to be looking at in the mentor program. And you'll be hearing from us on that. We're having a seminar or webinar next week with the mentors to talk about improvements to that. And then we'll be reaching out to the villages. And then we also have a public relations initiative that Wendy Zenker is heading up for the network, and there'll be a webinar on that after the first of the year. So please keep throwing all your ideas out here. If they don't fit into Joel's bucket, we may have some other buckets that they go into. So please, I'm really enjoying the conversation, and thanks for getting this group together, Joel. And back to you.
Thanks, Carol. No,
And Joel, one more thing. Debbie has her hand raised.
oh, okay, I'm not able to see that, so
No, that's why I'm in the
Great.
back. Yeah.
Debbie,
Debbie,
Yeah, hi, I'm in the Chicago area. I'm wondering if maybe we could talk a little bit today about how the election, is going to impact the village movement.
okay, let's note that I don't know if we'll be able to address that, Debbie, but I think it's an important concept, and it was part of why now. Why are we doing this now? We're at a different point in
Right.
history. Certainly, we had a very significant event seven days ago, and I think that there are and have been a lot of things over the last 9 months that has accelerated this opportunity and created new pathways for us, which is why this makes sense now. And the election and the aftermath is certainly part of that. If I could just address Sarah's question, and Sarah, you and I haven't had a chance to speak individually, but I think that what we're doing today is the first step in co-creating that vision. I want to be absolutely clear. This is not Joel's vision. This is not, I'm only trying to light a fire here, and that the group of us collectively are coming together over the next couple of weeks, maybe next couple of months, and essentially creating that next vision together. Some of us have talked, and there are some sort of foundational components of that. It's partly what we wanted to talk about today, but the point is to create a new trajectory for the broader village movement that could help existing villages transform to a new path, and emerging villages get on a more sustainable path early on. That's what I would say is sort of the big umbrella goal and mission here for coming together now and starting down this path, and that we're doing so in a more collective effort, as opposed to each individual village doing something to be more sustainable. I've had a number of villages in my conversations talk about their working on a new strategic plan, and that's wonderful. Every village should be doing that, and at the same time working in conjunction with other villages, so that we're leveraging one another. That is what I've heard from everybody else, is too often individual villages are working in their own silo. And certainly there are collaborations that are happening. As I pointed out during the gathering, we have wonderful collaborations already happening in Chicago and Columbus and Portland and Seattle and Washington, D.C. and Montgomery County, and other places today. And I believe that there's an opportunity to work across geographies in a different way that really has happened in only a limited manner up till now. Anybody want to speak to that, or anybody want to comment? And believe me, tell me where I'm off. That this is not meant to be Joel's perspective on things. I'm only trying to raise some questions and raise some opportunities.
This is Carol. I have something to say.
Thanks, Carol, please.
Yes. Well, in my mind, I just want to recap what I think I've talked with you before. What I think is a beginning way of thinking about this. We know that in our communities, no matter what status our village is at, we have wonderful people, and they are sparks. They are energy in the form of sparks. And we want them to be together as a flame, and being a significant flame to serve people in the village, in the community. And Joel, I think what you're saying is we don't want to just stick with a flame in our community. We want that to spread and to become a wildfire. So that it is, we're helping each other. I'm not sure fire is a good analogy when we start talking about wildfires, but the idea is that we're going to spread and be with other villages. That part is, I guess, what we're working on. And as we talked before, and I've been thinking about this a lot, Sometimes it's from a calamity or some emergency that the sparks get together and make a flame. And part of that is that the sparks often need to have feeling themselves a part of a larger movement, that it's important because it's something large. So I am interested in 1C, how can you help me get my organization unstuck? And I think so far I know it has to do with calamities and being a part of something larger. That's all I have to say.
That's excellent. Thank you, Carol. I think that does speak to where we are now and what is possible. And to your question, or your comment, Jackie, I couldn't agree more. I think there's a lot of effort going on right now to support older adults and other people in communities that we are not connected to. And it's unfortunate. And I think we can do better to raise our profile and align with other organizations, because you're right. There's a lot of duplicated effort. There's a lot of inefficiency. Let's put it that way. There's a lot of inefficiency in our communities today, in our aging services, and in the village to village activities. So let me give one example, and then Francine, then I see you raising your hand, I'll call on you. Just last week, Wendy Zenker, who may or may not have joined us yet, but is on the national board, brought something to my awareness called the Social Fabric Project. It was started by David Brooks, the writer from the New York Times, and I can actually share. It's through the Aspen Institute. Here's a link to the website, and it's all about community development. And as I read about it, and I've been looking into it over the last week, it speaks directly to what villages have done for years about weaving community together. And it's sponsored by the Walton Foundation and Next Door. To me, this is an opportunity that, again, it wasn't even on my radar a week ago. Maybe some of you have heard about it, but this speaks to me about a national initiative that aligns beautifully with what we are already doing. The people running and volunteering today are weavers in their community. And I'll share with you a link to this site and to the TED Talk and a newspaper article. But this is an example. When you mentioned the Service Corps, Jackie, that's near and dear to my heart, because that's absolutely something that I think we should be aligning with as well. Francine, you had
on the David Brooks, he speaks about that in his new book, The Second Mountain. And if you get a chance to look at that book, he features that a lot. I'm in the Albany, Saratoga, New York area, and we have a group called the Albany Guardian Society that is trying to initiate and start villages. And they do a collaborative every couple of months. It gets all the groups together. It's very, very useful to get together with other villages. If you're in a remote area, you can't, but you always gain from being with other folks.
And if anybody didn't get to hear the presentation on the second week of the National Gathering that was led by Ken Harris of the Albany Collaborative Group, it is well worth your time. Some wonderful collaboration occurring in a network of about almost 10 villages now, I think, and growing. Francine? Okay, let me go back to the agenda. Any other comments while we're going here? Okay, so the second part of the agenda was really a chance for everybody to speak, and I'm glad everybody is already chiming in, but I wanted to start broader and then get a little bit more narrower. But I wanted a chance for everybody to be able to communicate what a thriving village movement would look like and include. I'm not talking about a thriving village to village network organization. I'm talking about a thriving village movement, and we've already started to talk about it, but I just want to give people a chance to talk about it. some of you heard me say, what if we were starting a village movement today with the idea of having as many villages as Starbucks, right? We would operate, we would partner, we would do some things very, very different. So can I put it back out to all of you? And we're taking notes on this and we're recording it, but what to you would a thriving village movement include?
Joel, this is Beverly Lunsford.
Hi, Beverly.
I'm from George Washington University and I teach in the School of Nursing. I would like every healthcare provider to know that there's a village network and how to contact them in their community to make referrals when they know that people are needing either something meaningful in their life or when they're and I am just appalled when I open up the topic in any non-security meeting and nobody knows what villages are.
So there, thank you, Beverly. So there, needless to say, there have been talks over the years, lots of discussions about how do we connect better with healthcare organizations? How do we learn to speak their language? How do we offer something? We know we offer something, but how do we present it in a way? Certainly there are villages that have done some wonderful things over the years. Molly is on, Molly Singer, who led Capitol Hill Village for many years. Hi, Molly. And there are examples of things that have occurred. Now, part of the Reimagining initiative, how can we do that at a broader scale? I think that comes down to different types of relationships and a different value proposition than we've delivered in the past. And a whole lot more, but certainly alignment with not only healthcare providers, but there are initiatives underway in many states and communities around age-friendly health systems. Not just age-friendly communities, age-friendly health systems. We should be absolutely working in conjunction with those and helping expand that. And that's, that's certainly things that are already underway.
Joel.
Yes. Hey, Paul.
Hi. I have two different answers to your question. One, in response to what Beverly was just saying, is I think the village movement will be thriving when people in healthcare and in elder care don't say, what's a village? I mean, even to this day, we all still get that every day. And I think what has to happen is the knowledge about villages has to be such that it doesn't matter whether you are a municipal community outreach person, or you're a geriatrician or gerontologist, or a skilled nursing facility, or anything like that. You need, or even an office on aging. The idea, I just mentioned all of those groups, all of those titles or actuaries, or whatever entities you want to address them as, based on the fact that those are things that we all know about that have to do with aging. Villages have to become just another part of the vocabulary of aging and aging in place. That's one thing. And I think we can do it through really having an environment of sharing, through really having a great environment of community. We tried doing that here in the Northeast Ohio area, and COVID has really slowed us down. But quite honestly, the village on the west side of Cleveland that already exists has not, and I'm not throwing stones, really been a great community organization that we can reach out with. There are some other organizations in Cleveland that are trying to start villages. And quite honestly, it's very interesting. Both of them are from senior centers who find that their budgets have gone to hell. And the idea of a village makes so much more sense.
All right, let's hear some more.
Okay. So now the other part of the answer is, I think a lot of that might come from looking at those successful hub and spoke villages that are out there that have great neighborhood associations. I know San Francisco is amazing with what they do with their neighborhood villages. Home Haven has a number of neighborhood villages and organization cohorts throughout the community, and they function beautifully. I'd really like to hear from those organizations if they can help us, if they're not here now, to understand how they do and what do they think makes it work.
Actually, Jacqueline Zimmer Jones has something to say too.
Okay.
Hi, and just a follow up to Paul's comments, which were great. We are a fairly largish village here in San Francisco. Our village is neighborhood based, and things that came to mind when Paul was talking was that there are healthcare organizations, hospitals and such that do know about us. More are finding out about us. What we're noticing is that they think that we are going to do their work for them. They sort of just want to offload people that are being discharged from the hospital, and they don't realize that there is a fee attached, even though we don't turn anybody away. So so even if they do know about us, they oftentimes just see us as a place to get somebody out the door and into some sort of services. But beyond that, our own area agency on aging, who's very supportive of our work and helps fund our program.
Excuse me, Jackie.
Yeah,
whoever is talking, can you put yourself on mute, please? Thank you.
Even though they know about us and they support our work, if you call into the Department of Aging at the city for resource help and you ask them about us, they don't know about us. Like they're so big and they have so much staff, and they just don't. Our own Department of Aging doesn't refer people because their own staff doesn't know about it. So I think it's super important to partner with your local area agency on aging, but also your county supervisors, because that's generally where area agencies on dollars flow through. But you know, when you're trying to build awareness about your own organization, it you know, that is a place where two places where we're running into sort of problems. The healthcare agencies want to just offload people on us, and our is so big that we're not the first thing that comes to mind when they're looking at providing services.
You know, this is Judy from Capitol Hill Village. I got my internet shut down, and I apologize for that. One of the things that occurs to me about this is that we need to do a better job of defining the space in which we operate. In the sense of, you know, institutions get attention, and villages are not yet really an institution, nor is this idea of aging in place, right? Aging in place is kind of it's a time. It's a thing you do before you go to a retirement home, or, you know, it doesn't really have a recognizable place in the scheme of the aging institutions. It's also a very sort of classist definition, right? Because people have been aging in place forever with the help of their families and neighbors. Sorry, now I've got other noise. You know, because they don't have enough money to move into one of these continuing care homes, or they're there until they can't survive and then they go to a nursing home or something like that. So it seems to me that we need to do something to really claim this space. And the part of the problem with that too is it doesn't belong only to villages, right? There's lots of organizations and institutions that are doing what we do with slightly different models, right? In whether it's churches that have a senior ministry that are doing this, or there are larger organizations that have of senior services that have a component that they may call aging in place, or, you know, doing chore, they send in chore assistants, or, things like that that are designed to help people kind of maintain their status quo. And they aren't necessarily doing what we're doing, which is sort of more holistic and sort of purpose driven and things like that. But I think that we need to do a better job of kind of defining that space and then claiming our place in it. Because, and I also think that this, going back to the question about what the Biden administration, what this new administration has, a lot of these decisions about, I'm sure, I am sure that funding opportunity through the Community Care Corps or whatever was a couple of people who had the ear of the right people at the right time.
Absolutely.
Right? This wasn't a big institutional decision. It wasn't like, oh, it was what those people knew about and what they wanted to promote. So we've got to get our people connected with the transition people now, and make sure that villages and other sort of, and our sort of, whatever we think of as our aligned partners, we need to get those folks into the Department of Health and Human Services, or, transportation or housing, or wherever this needs to live, as part of our advocacy efforts going forward. As well as all these things that are happening on the ground in terms of making ourselves more visible, more effective, and all of that. So I think this is really a multi-pronged kind of issue that we're dealing with.
I noticed that Atul Gawande is on the new coronavirus task force, so.
That's good. Hey, Molly had a comment also.
Go ahead, Molly. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Judy.
So up until Judy was talking, I kind of heard two similar parallel veins, and one of them was local networking, and one of them was, or kind of locally, what can folks do within a network, and then nationally, what can we do? And my understanding from Joel in calling this meeting was that he's speaking on behalf of Village to Village Network and the board in terms of what can collectively the Village to Village Network, along with the support of others, do. And in my opinion, I think there's two things that can kind of launch us quickly. If I were on the board, which I have no wish to be, I would say to make it kind of, maybe three things you could do. But one is to find the national foundations, such as, the MacArthur, where you can do presentations, like foundations whose mere underwriting, to say nothing about the money, but their endorsement is important. So, Robert Wood Johnson, MacArthur Foundation, the one that's up in Michigan, whatever they are, the one that is really into logic models. And then I would also work the way into HHS, CDC, HRSA, and really sell the evidence of the model, right? Which of course means creating evidence for the model. But to me, if the Village to Village was super focused on that, because that's the kind of recognition you need to legitimize, in my opinion, across the board. And I don't think lots of like, well, if we could get to David Brooks, who does happen to live on Capitol Hill and was zero responsive when I was there to any outreach to him. I think otherwise you're dabbling in a lot of pots, which is difficult. In my opinion, the Village to Village Network should kind of be singularly focused, put all their money in one pot, or all their balls, or whatever, gray hairs. So there you go. There's my 2 cents.
Now, this is Sharon in Reston, Virginia. And let me just jump in. In a sense, we've sort of been here before, several years ago, communicating what does a village do? What's its role in the community? And so I've just heard about, well, be in touch with your AAA,
If it's white,
your county, your county resources, and so on and so forth. So I'm just, wondering, piece of this can be a communication and education model, who you should partner with, and develop. I mean, those models are out there because some places we have great relationship with
Yeah, it's in the back of the car.
supportive, etc.
Several of them are.
Not. So I would say that communication and outreach and education is part of it, but still the bigger piece, I think we started out with reimagining. I mean, communication is an old education. We've been there before. We need to keep on doing it. We need to, work with partners. We work with senior aging in the community. But the other piece that Joel was starting with, which is really reimagining the village, the model itself. That if it's not going to be the standard model of fundraising and providing the services the way they provided in the past, what is the new way in terms of being the village? That's sort of what I take from this.
Well, it seems like one of the,
Go ahead, Judy, please.
I just think, that Molly makes a really important point, which is about the data. And it's certainly one of the issues that we struggle with is the need for data and the willingness of members to participate in something that smacks of, kind of tracking data. I think that's a tension in the village and the sort of grassroots, like we're doing it for ourselves. Why do we need to, sign in and things like that? But that whole issue of having a data-driven model, where we can draw on each other. I mean, that's where we build each other up, right? Is we share our data just as we share our model. And that becomes the thing that, you can't market on air, right? You have to have something that you're selling. And I think what we need to do is build that database, make some agreements about what we're collecting, and move that forward.
Thanks, Judy. That's absolutely, I think, part of a collective action across villages is to build that data that can create the evidence that we know that we're delivering into our communities. But we've never had the ability to go to those national foundations and really prove in an effective manner what we're doing. So that is part of the reimagining, is sparking that collective action right there. I wanted to just raise, I think you can see on my screen, this is a document that was put together in 2015 called Sustaining the Village Movement. And you can see many of you who know Candace Baldwin Robinson, part of Capital Impact Partners, was very instrumental. I believe this was funded through, I believe Archstone was part of who funded this. But it's been interesting to me. It's about a 50 or so page document. It's not a roadmap, but there's a lot of great information there. And it's been interesting to me how very few people have actually even seen this document before. And so part of what I wanted to share, and you'll see it's out of the homework that comes out of this meeting, is just to make sure that people are seeing, because a lot of this has been talked about, reaching national foundations, bringing data together. This has been talked about in 2011. It was talked about in 2015. It was talked about, and yet here we are in 2020. So that's part of what this is all about. It's not that anything we're talking about is absolutely a new idea. Nothing I'm talking about reimagining hasn't already been talked about. It's how are we going to go do this together is, in my opinion, what the spark is that needs to happen going forward. Has anybody seen this document? Let's put it that way. Morgan? Great. Anybody else? Seal?
It's in the B2V reference library.
Yes, it is. Okay.
So are you saying that village business models and sustainability has a gem within it to tell us about, or give us freedom to just really reimagine our villages within this village business models and sustainability? It has a lot of various ways to help us reimagine our villages.
Well, Carol, to that point, I think, and that really brings us to the third point on the agenda. I think the model today, and sure we have all volunteer villages, we have all no dues or low dues, we have paid membership villages, but from what I've heard from a lot of people representing villages over the last 5 to 15 years is there has been significant dependence on membership dues or some local foundational grants, but that those have become less reliable going forward. And many villages who have existed now for 5 to 10 to 15 years have either plateaued in terms of their number of paid memberships or have decreased significantly. So part of the reimagining of the village movement, I believe, is a reimagining of the business model that drives new funds into the national organization, into the regional, and then right down to the local. And that has not happened up till now. Anybody have any comments about that? I certainly have a lot of thoughts about it, but I'd rather hear from other people
I
here.
do.
Molly, please.
So I'm interested to learn. I hear what you're saying, and I feel like there are fledgling efforts out in the field. The California villages are doing interesting things. CHV is doing great things. What has village to village, what steps have you guys taken so far? And like, what is the kind of feedback findings on those been?
Carol, were you about to say something to that, or I couldn't tell? Are you?
Well, I could mention that one of the things that I'm seeing, I'm the Meta program coordinator for the network. And I'm seeing much more interest in, let me get too superlative here. I'm seeing increasing interest in various types of sponsored business models where startup groups are looking for anything from a fiscal sponsor to being actually a unit within another organization. A social service or healthcare organization. Someone from Cleveland mentioned some senior centers that are starting villages. I have inquiries from a half dozen senior centers that are interested in starting villages. So I think there are some interesting new approaches out there. I'm having a conversation with a potential new board member that is going to help spearhead a study of these emerging business models so that we have more information out there about different ways of starting villages than the traditional, you start your little nonprofit and whether you charge dues or don't charge dues, but you try to do everything on your own. There are certainly some interesting questions to address in terms of what the whole village ethos is when you get involved with another organization, but they seem to be able to be surmountable. So I'm
sorry. I think I misstated my question. You didn't answer the question that I thought I was asking. So let me try again. What I mean is, what steps, I'm aware of what steps villages distributed have done. What steps has Village to Village Network Central Office done in this regard? Because it's been the network that's been talking about it at least for 10 years, since 2011 when these ideas first came up. So are there ways that we can go through like what we tried, how might we tweak that? Should we abandon that idea? Next thing we tried, tweak, abandon. I'm trying to get that base foundation information in order to be more additive. So maybe Joel or Deborah? Barbara, sorry. Barbara can answer.
So, it's funny, Jay Fine addressed this in her comments in the chat room. So the network, as you know, we have a twofold responsibility, not just to the membership, but also to the advocacy part of it and trying to outreach. So the last 2 years under my, supervision or whatever, we have made great strides in trying to clean up that document library, which is a monster. and it continues to be a monster. It's outdated. We've updated a lot of the materials, but we have 2 dedicated board members that have gone through and itemized and looked at, you know, the categories and trying to make it easier, more user friendly, but it takes time. I mean, and the manpower, and you all know, there's 2 staffers. I have, you know, 2.2, you know, FTEs in, you know, so running the village and everything else is dedicated. We also have a group that's looking at, you know, the data collection and how we're going to address that. There's a whole group that's meeting separately. Carol's group with the mentor group, and some, you know, the committees that are forming, and Joel has spearheaded the strategic partnership. So I'm not saying the previous boards haven't been active working boards, but you see an uptick with our new board in looking at the infrastructure of the network itself. And I want to say it's cleanup time. And then we do have that ability to go in and start advocating, you know, between our access to Capitol Hill and the folks that we have in place now that we have this administration going in. We're encouraged on how we could possibly get our foot in the door a little bit more. So if that's answering your question, hopefully. The other avenue is we have a great need to do marketing, and whether or not we come out with a starter video, which has been mentioned, you know, we have sat for the last 2 years with AARP. And let me tell you, if there was ever a cultivation, it is cultivating this relationship and getting them to commit to being more vested into the movement and scaling it. And Carol, I don't know if you want to tag on that. Wendy, Pazit are on the call too. So.
No, I think you expressed it very well. It's a very long haul trying to get a commitment out of AARP.
Yeah, well, and also the document library, let's face it, I would like to see, and we have tried to streamline the process of our developing village from that 2-year mark and whittling it down to be, you know, more, you know, of a year to 15-month process. But again, you know, it's money, it's time, it's resources, it's the marketing tools. Ideally, I'd love to send out a video to show what we are. That's our next pitch. So in the meantime, I agree, we need a college student to come in and help categorize, you know, an intern type of thing. So any suggestions? We're always open. You know, my door is always email, always open. So have at it.
Hey guys, it's Jackie. I have to jump off in a minute, but this conversation, Barbara, that you just laid out for me is telling, right? You're 2.2 people. And the thing that you're asked to do most often is get the library cleaned up so people can access data and learn from what others have done, right? You're in the transactional mode. And you have to, like we all do, we have to run the operation, we have to do advocacy, we have to get out there and be partners with government and liaise with them, and on and on and on. This is the transformation for me. How do we carve up the pie in a way that people can focus on what it is to get the library in place and get data, all that sort of stuff? And then how do we get liaisons at a much higher level that are telling the story and using the data to tell the story? The guy that was on the national gathering from the state of New York, I did screenshots every 10 seconds because that's our story. The resource library is what folks need to run the day-to-day operations. Those types of data and the value that we bring is unseen by whomever we talk to, whether it's government or funders. And the village name kind of doesn't always get us in the door, right? They don't know what it means. Are we a homeowners association? But the bottom line is, somehow or other, this transformation needs to allow the 2.2 people who work their asses off to do what they need to do while we take it to another level, and together somehow or other we advocate and we tell the story, and we're operating up here where you can't see my hand. That's where I think we need to be. And on that note, you can all talk about me when I jump off. I have to go to a steering committee meeting.
Wait, Jackie, I just want to let you know you're pivotal because the president is from Delaware. So we're expecting big things from the Lewis, Delaware group. I'm telling you right now.
His summer house is 3 miles down the road.
I know where he lives.
Let's camp out. Jackie, thank you for your comments. I think before you drop off in 1 minute, I think what you're speaking to, I've heard I've seen in my local village, I've heard from other villages, we are understaffed. We all know that. Everybody is doing that both at a local level and a national level. And part of what I believe in bringing new fuel into the engine, and by fuel, I mean new revenue streams, is to create more paid opportunities at the local and national level. I know we're not going to get there in the next couple months, but to me, that's part of reimagining, because you're right. There is the tactical stuff of maintaining a village or a village network. And then there is the strategic, the visionary, the collaborative. How do we get out there and align with other organizations and create new opportunities? And I see it at the local level and I see it at the national level. That's what hasn't happened, and that's what doesn't happen because of how we are structured today, I believe.
I agree. And I appreciate your allowing me to rant just a little bit. It's the place in the middle. It's getting the hospitals to pay, because those discharged patients, they cost time, they cost energy, they cost money, training. We need to get the ACOs involved. We're helping keep people out of the hospital. We're helping keep people out of nursing homes. Thousands of dollars a day times all of our members. That's our value proposition. And that's where I think, in my mind at least, I'd like to focus and to be able to tell that story that Barbara was talking about way up here.
Thanks, Jackie.
Thank you, everybody.
We're about an hour in, and I'm so grateful to you all for coming.
Jackie.
And I know this is probably both exciting and frustrating. I know I've felt that for years, because we all know there's incredible opportunity, and we are positioned so well, and yet we aren't. And so I just wanted to use this time, an hour in, to say, if you came here expecting to hear the answer, I don't have it, and I'm not sure anybody here does have the answer, but what could be possible going forward is working together to get closer to what that answer is and then sharing it. And that's the main goal of what I'm trying to spark with this idea of a cohort, is that people step forward, and that's different than serving on the national board of the Village to Village Network. That's an opportunity as well. And there's lots of, this is what I'm looking for here, is some co-partners in crime, if you will, to go figure this out together.
Joel, we have 2 hands raised.
Okay.
One is Steele and one is Paul. So Steele, go first.
Thank you.
I raised my hand a few minutes back, so I don't know how much it's relevant, but a couple things. And what made me think of this was Barbara telling her story about cultivating this relationship with AARP. And I hear you, sister, about how complicated that is. I wish there was, like, this is going to sound weird, it's not the right word, a support group or a cohort of people who really want to talk about fundraising successes, failures, what's worked for you, what's not. I know we have the listserv, but I mean, I'm about to do some serious pivoting with fundraising, because our whole model has changed, because we can't do an in-person fundraiser. And yeah, I know we can do a virtual fundraiser and put logos on the screen and everything, but I'm having to change my whole corporate sponsorship model, and I'm trying to form true partnerships. Here's a case in point. So what made me think of this? I am pitching AARP, my local Virginia AARP, and about a partnership. Well, I talked to my board member who knows how AARP runs, and she's going to make the initial overture. She said, Seal, understand, when you're talking to AARP, partnership is not a word you can use. That brings in the legal department you got to use the word sponsorship. And I'm like, very interesting, because they have been, open to sponsorships, but they have. So it's sort of like that sharing. If all of us have little tidbits like that, if we could all kind of share that, like, this is what worked for me when I pitched AARP. Oh, that works. I mean, if we can like really like talk and trust one another, because we're not really going after the same dollars, but really start helping one another with this sort of stuff. Like, I had success getting a major gift from a donor who was selling their house. Here's how I pitched it. I mean, just really some fundamental things that can be game changers for us. I don't know.
That's something that we can do within the network and have networking, sessions, just roundtable discussions, a roundtable discussion on, fundraising, on, board, just like we did at, the conferences in the past, where you have a group of people and you brainstorm.
But I don't want to put the work on you. I mean, if we can just sort of.
But the work on us is just hosting it, where, the real work comes from you guys and your information and the sharing. So what, it takes 5 minutes to open a Zoom call. Really, that's not that big a deal.
What I want to highlight with what you're saying, Seal, is, to me, and this is what I hear, a lot of those conversations around what is really sponsorship and not partnership have happened over the years, and that's not been good enough. That's, in my opinion, that's not a reimagining of the model.
Fair enough.
Partnership, and we need to do both. It's not that we're getting out of getting sponsors and fundraising. We just, in my opinion, need a different engine where we can depend on shared revenue streams. That's a partnership. That's very different than sponsorship.
Yeah, for sure.
That's what I'm hoping that this group is focused on. The kinds of relationships with for-profit companies, with foundations, where there is a shared value exchange that the villages participate in rather than go begging for, right? We know, to Molly's point, there are dollars out there that are being transferred that we are not participating in. And that's really, I think, what is a fundamental shift of what we need to be, again, at a national level, all the way down to a local level, which is very different. We need to do what you're talking about as well, and we can do that. But I just wanted to make that distinction. Paul, you had a point, and then Francine, I see you raising your hand.
Paul, and then Ed.
Okay, thank you. Things, and certainly, I totally am appreciative of the work that the home office in St. Louis does, especially, when it seems like there's so many more people doing the work than there actually are. It's kudos to you guys, Barbara. But
Thanks.
So that being said, I'm the last person to want to make more work for you. However, two things that I'd love to see. One, doesn't get involved with more work for you. I'd like to see that the Village to Village Network board become, and Joel, you and I have talked about this, become more of a regional organization rather than an at-large. I think that would help with having people that understand what is going on in their town, state, or their tri-state area, for example. And also it might foster greater cooperation among some of the existing villages. There are some regions that are dense enough to be on their own, like California. My God, it's its own region. But then, you've got a Great Lakes group. You've got 10 villages in Ohio, which really isn't 10 villages. It's more like 8 or 7, and 10 in some fashion or other. But I think that would be helpful to grow some camaraderie and some sharing. Additionally, I'd like to know that either through the resource library or among the Village to Village Network leadership, de facto or otherwise, that we can look to a topic a content topic to find who should we speak to. For example, you know, Joel is the guy who you want to talk to about strategic planning, or, you know, Mary Jones is the person that is the best fundraiser in BTV. Likewise, I'd love to see if there were more committees devoted specifically to the areas that we all need to work on, and whether they're actual committees themselves or resource teams that self-populate as the need arises. I think that could be helpful for all involved.
Well, I think that's part of the goal of the mentor group. Carol's jumping on, so she can answer more appropriately. But, you know, this is the whole premise of the board and their discussion at the annual conference was to start creating some of these committees to get people to do it. And I don't know how you would form a regional board group, but, you know, as a regional organization, but the regional groups that are forming are naturally becoming, you know, the resource, like the group up in Massachusetts, you know, where they meet, you know, once a month. Or, I mean, a prime example is the WAVE group, which exponentially grew because all they did was meet and form and talk, and then it grew and it snowballed more than any other regional group in the country. You know, I mean, there's 80 villages in the Washington metropolitan area, you know, in that tri-state area. So there's a reason that happened. And it happened between 2010 and 2015 is because they were dedicated in mentoring. Carol, what were you going to say?
Well, I was just going to say, I really like Paul's comments, because one of the things we're going to be going forward with, and we touched on at the national gathering, is we need more volunteers helping us at the network. You know, we have excellent volunteers that help us with planning the yearly conference. But as you all note, there's a lot of work for the network to do, and with the small staff that we have, and even with the working board, there's still lots of work for people. So we're really hoping to re-energize our committee structure and our work groups. And one of the reasons we had that conversation session was to get feedback from you. This is a little better mechanism with the smaller webinar, where we can actually talk to each other than the huge group we had in the gathering, to get your input and what your concerns and interests are for the network to be doing. So I think this has been very helpful and feeds right into, you know, what we've been thinking about and talking about on the board. So greatly appreciate everybody's comments and observations.
Thank you.
So just in the interest of time, we have about 20 minutes left. And I thought in the last part, it's really about what comes next. And oh, you know what, Francine, I'm sorry, you had your hand raised.
Just a quickie. There are lots of volunteer groups out there that deal with volunteer driving, and driving is a big part of what we are asked to do. I don't know if all the villages have the same kind of thing. Are you aware of the Beverly Foundation at all? All right, that's something.
Yes, I am. Very much so.
Yes. That we should be talking about as well. Okay.
Thanks, Francine. So let me go back to the agenda. Again, we were trying to provide some structure, but also allow for just a little bit of a free-for-all, because I wanted to create a forum that people could share. We really weren't able to do that in the same way with the virtual gathering, where people could just come together and talk and figure out what's important. So that's part of what this is about today. Let me scroll down here. I think moving to sort of the what's next. Well, let me just add the question. Could anybody speak to, we've talked about healthcare a little bit, but does anybody have any thoughts on the kinds of partners, again, using the idea of partner in the interest of a shared revenue opportunity. Anybody want to speak to either what they heard during the gathering in the first couple of weeks, during the closing session, or what they know about in general? I've had, for example, a lot of people requesting information about how to connect around the social isolation, using technology around bridging the digital divide and technology. Is there anything that anybody wants to share that they believe is more of a priority in terms of partnerships with either for-profit companies, et cetera? Sharon?
So this is a thought, and before COVID, this was much more intense. There are many groups of providers in Northern Virginia, and they have different names. So there's one group called WAFA. I won't even bother to translate it. It has nothing to do with Washington. It's Western Fairfax. And they approached me, and there are several new senior living communities that have opened in Reston, and they're lovely. And one of them approached me and said, you know, we talk among ourselves as providers, but we really would like to hear what the consumers have to say. So we'd like to invite Reston for a Lifetime once a month for a hot breakfast and a speaker. And didn't cost us obviously anything. And it was and so it began this sort of mutual, you know, we have a newsletter, so we periodically push out webinars that these various senior living communities are having. So I was just speculating, not that as a possible real revenue source in terms of pushing out the availability of senior living. You know, some people can be aging in place, they can be living in senior communities, be a part of a village. And so that is just a thought. And I never really even talked about finances with them. But it just seems to me maybe it's something to be tapped. So I'll just leave it there as an idea. And Steve Gurney, who is on this call, who's very instrumental in helping spear these breakfasts and these get-togethers. He is the real entrepreneur, and maybe can add, or really has done, I think, some thinking in this area. So that's my thought on maybe revenue.
Thanks, Sharon. I think for those of you who have known about what was formerly called North Shore Village, now Wise Up here in Evanston, that Debbie is involved with, and I was on the board for 6 years. We have a unique relationship with Mather, and that has gone on now for more than 9 years, I believe, where Mather, as part of their community initiatives program, subsidizes our and provides office space for our executive director. That is not a relationship. That is not a partnership that has really scaled across the country. It's still a bit of an anomaly. I happen to believe with COVID, there are a lot more senior living organizations that will be thinking about at-home service opportunities than ever before. So I think we're at a new age, and we should be having different conversations than we probably have had over the last 10 or so years. And Mather has expressed an interest as an organization of potentially getting more involved, not just here in Evanston, but in other parts of Chicago and potentially other parts of the country. So thank you.
Actually, it is a growing trend, and we have probably 4 or 5 senior living communities. Landis in Lancaster, who presented at the conference. You have Goodwin House at Home that partners with several of the Virginia villages. There's one out in Ohio, Celebration down in Florida. So more and more so, the reality is in senior living, only 7% of the population can really afford senior living. So they're looking to see what other areas they can expand into.
The difference, Barbara, in the past is they've been typically more of a sponsorship,
right,
of organizations. And
right,
I
and
believe
not a partnership.
senior living organizations are going to, if they're not thinking about new revenue streams, they're going to get passed by. And there is the potential to work in collaboration with villages to create new revenue streams.
Totally agree.
And that hasn't been done. That to me is part of what we can figure out. I've had several people in over the last couple of weeks mentioned there's already conversations happening there.
Interesting. Good.
Deborah, I'm gonna call you out. Sorry, Deborah Gavro from Sarasota, because you really represent a community where there have been initiatives underway over the years, but there's a new energy and there's new collaboration that's occurring. I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but do you mind just speaking? We've had some exciting conversations over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I'm happy to, Joel, very quickly. And coincidentally, I just raised my hand. In terms of the revenue model, so to the conversation, it's so interesting to hear all of this because I'm so new. We're just forming a village here. The Patterson Foundation, which is the organization that I work for, is very interested in this local region. But when Joel brought up the reimagining in the gathering, I brought that back to the organization. And one of the initiatives at the Patterson Foundation is all about nonprofits, supporting nonprofits to have the margin to support their mission, margin, mission, ignition, and advancing mission thrivability is another aspect of it. And the consultants that work with this body of work and also support nonprofits in our region, you know, there might be something that we can do here because this is what they do. They really, this pair of consultants, they really work on helping nonprofits really identify new ways to expand their revenue base, to have a new revenue model, to identify ways to create impact so that those who might be interested, funders, governmental agency, and so on and so forth, you know, so the organizations are prepared and move through the process to be able to be substantial, to step into a new reality, which is the conversation I think is here about reimagining villages. And so, you know, I don't know whether that was what you were thinking of when you called on me, Joel, but I think the possibility there for advancing mission thrivability, that's the work that Joel, you're going to participate in, I think, right? There's a 5-week program, which could four session program that could advance into more detailed work. So to me, there's a big picture here, the strategic picture that is so important to understand where this group is going so that then, you know, where are we now and where are we going and what are the steps to get from here to there? It's like a very simple construct, but at some point to weave away the things that aren't on topic and have another place for those important conversations to go and to be able to move this work forward so that what hasn't turned into a strong movement is freed up to be able to do that.
Thanks, Deborah. That's absolutely what I wanted to point out, in which you noted, is I'm of the belief that there are groups out there like the Patterson Foundation that are doing great work both locally in our communities already. Sometimes our villages are aligned with them, but typically it's only been in a limited way. And I believe there's an opportunity to draw some of these foundations together and to let them sort of share the risk by being part of a broader ecosystem where they have the opportunity to affect a lot more communities. Sasha, who represents Canopy of Neighbors in Buffalo, she and I have had many conversations over the last year about the Ralph Wilson Foundation, the Oshai Group. There is money out there. We're just not aligned yet. And I believe there's the opportunities to take what we're doing in some individual communities and cross-train one another. And that's part of where I'm hopeful that what the Patterson Foundation could inform what Sasha is doing in Buffalo, could inform what Hillary is doing in Denver, could inform what Paul's doing in Cleveland, and that kind of collaboration really hasn't been teed up prior to this point. just looking around to see if anybody's raising their hands or any. Sasha, please.
First of all, I'd like to thank everybody for all of their comments and wisdom. It's always great to get together on this level, especially when you can interact. And I'd love to jump off of what Deborah said. I think, you know, having been with this group for over 5 years and coming into a village that for 5 years was trying to find its identity. And when I first started, nobody on the board level or the 2 people that worked in the office could actually tell me what they did, what value they added to the community. There was no elevator speech. There was no way to brand because we hadn't figured out where we fit into the puzzle. Nobody had asset mapped. There was no opportunity to fill in gaps because we didn't even know our own story. So fast forward 5 years, I've been very fortunate to have a smaller urban community where we can make more of an impact than people in large spaces where it's very difficult to get indoors. Buffalo is a very insular community and we all somehow know each other. So what we did was put together a strategic plan, and that's the oldest thing in time. You know, plan your work your plan. I think it may be time for the village movement to rebrand, to step out and say, after a 20-year time span, to position ourselves as community-based organizations at the beginning of the care continuum. We're the only ones positioned there that can address social isolation, that can fill in the gaps, that are pre-screeners, that are proactive, that are community building, that are community-based. They provide social services, health services, address all the social determinants of health, address socioeconomic issues, housing issues. If we don't rebrand ourselves as the people who do this work in the communities, then no one at the top is really going to understand what we do while we all horizontal speak again years and years. We all have great ideas. We talk to each other, but the conversations stay here. And we all need a common message so that the conversation grows with the same purpose and the same space so that our missions can thrive. But we're all still busy in our communities trying to prove our value. I have data that we collect of how many hours we spend addressing transportation, in-home care, healthcare proxy care. We divide all our services out, and we have data that we present to funders that tell the value of our work and how we impact the social service model, the transportation model, and that data isn't good enough. I'd like to have healthcare data. I'd like to partner with telehealth and technology firms because the money's not with AARP. The money's in taking partnerships with technology firms and moving telehealth and providing our members with the opportunities to have platforms they can't afford, they don't know how to get. We should teach them. We should be able to take a piece of the $3 billion that's in technology funding and trickle it down to our members, because if you revisit what we do now, 20 years later, from what you envisioned when you started, it's completely different. Our members have gone through the care continuum, and I don't know about a lot of you, but they're still with us. I'm healthcare proxy to 6 people, unfortunately. We have taken people all the way to senior communities and nursing homes. They're still members. We still do friendly visits. We have insinuated ourselves in every aspect of the community. And that's what every village across the country does. But we need to rebrand and tell this story, explain how we fill in the gaps, and explain how the funders at the top, our strategic partners, our desired strategic partners, the foundations that are looking to build community in their locales, the foundations that are looking to give caregiving money. I just got $10,000 from the Ralph Wilson Foundation and am featured in their caregiving series because I've spent 5 years pitching us as community caregivers. And if you want to look at where money is, it's not in AARP, it's in caregiving. Joe Biden believes in caregiving. Ralph Wilson Foundation funds caregiving. All you have to do is look at AARP's caregiving report that just came out to show the unbelievable lack of family caregiving support that we are going to face in 12 years.
So my suggestion is to take a look at our overall strategic plan and make sure that we're telling communities what we're doing, how we are proactive at the beginning of this care continuum. Go for funding that is actually real, because we've been sitting on AARP for 7 years. They don't give except to their workable communities and livable communities. You're going to grow old before you ever get money from AARP, to Joel's point, that's going to take our village movement to the next level. And if we rebrand and redo our strategic plan, I really believe you'll find the answer as to who benefits from our work in the community from the top down, so that this money can be invested in the CBOs that do this work.
Thank you, Sasha. I can stay on longer. Thank you very much. It looks like a number of people have dropped off, and so I think the best way to talk about some next steps will probably be in a follow-up. What I'm envisioning, what Hillary and I talked about, is to bring people back to have some individual conversations, maybe some group conversations over the next couple of weeks, and then have another session. Again, I don't want to meet just for the sake of meeting, but I wanted to create this meeting so we didn't lose momentum after the gathering. This was important to just bring everybody back together, and then we will continue to move this forward. My hope is that there will be work that happens in December and January and probably into February, and then a more formal plan will be created and then executed through the rest of 2021. What I'm looking for right now is the 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 or 50 people, whoever wants to jump in the water with us, to figure out what that plan should be and then help us execute the plan. That's really what today's conversation was meant to spark, that we have 5 or 10 or 20 villages represented that are willing to commit some time and resources to reimagining what the village movement and therefore villages can be in their communities. And hopefully we take a big step forward on that today. Any other comments or any other questions anybody wants to raise while we're still on?
No, but Joel, if you can share your agenda, and also, if we can solidify possibly a date in early December, that'd be great.
I was hoping to be able to have some conversation around that, but I don't think that's doable with what the group we have here.
Yeah.
But we'll figure out a date that makes sense, and then I think about a month out from now, 3 to 4 weeks from now, will be good, given what we all have on our plates the next couple of weeks.
Perfect.
So,
When and how will this this video be available?
we'll share the link afterwards, Sarah.
Okay.
We'll share the link by email, and then we could probably even post it in the Village Buzz, in the Network Buzz.
Yeah, that won't come out until early December, but we will send the link. Joel has all the emails.
I have everybody that was participating.
It's a YouTube
today.
link, so we'll share it with everyone. Okay.
Thank you.
Great.
Excellent.
Thank you all for joining. Thank you, Joel, for all your organizational
And thank you to
expertise.
Hillary too. Hillary is a big help on all this.
We've
Big
been
help.
taking lots of notes, and it's been great to hear from everyone. And we're really excited to come back together because, while we don't have all the answers and we'll be figuring that out together, we have started some of that groundwork, and we're really excited to continue to share that and work together to flesh that out. So really looking forward to more conversations, and thank you guys for being here. This was great.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks.